Today, we're going to be starting with the last section on decision making. So we are still looking at decision making. This is the last part of decision making. And here, what we'll be looking at is the fact that whenever we try to take decision, we need data to take those decisions. So we make projections, we make plans, right? But we know that there's nobody who can actually predict the future with 100% precision. So we know that plans would never be the same thing as our actual. And if we know that, does it mean that we will not plan? We still have to plan. However, what we want to do is to make sure that our plan is as close as possible. So we want the closest plan to actual. That is what we want to do. And the question is, how do we achieve that? And that is a question that we want to answer today, while we'll be focusing on risk and uncertainty. Because these two things are the reasons why our plans would not be the same as actual. So we need to find a way to manage them such that we can have a plan that is very close to the actual. And I'll start with the meaning of both risk and uncertainty, because some people also struggle to know the difference between the two. They are different, though they have something in common. What they have in common is the fact that both of them are telling us that there are many possible outcomes. So we don't know which one will happen. Outcomes are many, and they are all possible. The degree of possibility varies for sure, but we know that there are several outcomes that are possible. So this is common with both of them. But there is something that differentiates the two, and that is the fact that risk can be quantified. But unfortunately, it is not possible to quantify uncertainty. So this is not quantifiable. However, that is not an excuse to ignore uncertainty. We still have to do what we have to do so that we manage it. So what do we have to do? We have to find a way to quantify it. So what we're saying is we need to find a way to turn it to risk. So we need to convert to risk. And how do you want to do that? The only way to do that is to go into what I will call market research. And what does market research help us to do? Market research helps us to get data. So this will help us to get data that we need so that we can quantify risk. And how do we get this data? Through the market research, we can do customer survey, which means we send some questions to customers, or you can call it questionnaires, just to get information on how customer will behave, how they will respond to options of decisions that we want to take. And based on that, we can decide on what decision is good for the company. We can even send these same questions to focus groups. So you target the part of the market that we want to sell into, and we are sending them questions to know whether they are actually interested in our product. Another strategy you can use is to do a test marketing. Test marketing just means that you are selling few prototypes. Prototypes are sample products. So you have not produced in commercial quantity, but you just made few prototypes and you are selling to a small market. To a small part of market, just to see how customers will receive the product. So with this method, you are able to get data, and once we get data from this market research, what we can do is now to use risk management quantitative methods. And what would this give us? When we use this method, then we will be able to determine the most likely outcome. because that is where we want to be. Because our plan should be based on the most likely outcome. With that, we'll be very close to reality. That is what we want to do. So once we're able to get the data, then we have something that is called risk that can be quantified. Then we can now use our method, quantitative methods, to determine what is the most likely outcome. Then we plan based on that. The question is, what are these methods? So we want to look at this method, those various methods that we can use. Let's look at them. The first method is the sensitivity analysis. Sensitivity analysis. And if you remember, we've touched on this a couple of times in our previous lectures when I spoke about margin of safety. Because this is what we will be calculating. This is what we're interested in with sensitivity analysis. What is sensitivity analysis? Sensitivity analysis is just a method. Yeah, it's a method that shows how much a variable will change for management to change their decision. It's as simple as that. So it's a method that shows, let me put it down quickly, that shows how much, that is your margin of safety, how much a variable will have to change for management, that is the company, to change their decision. Yeah, and that is margin of safety. So we use margin of safety in CVP analysis, remember. Yeah, when we say, okay, imagine if revenue is 50 and you have a cost that is 30. Definitely your projected profit is 20. So you will say here that means that your margin of safety for revenue is 20, because it means that revenue will have to reduce by 20 for you to change your decision. Because if you have a project or an investment that you are projecting this profit, you will do it because it's profitable. However, if it's a loss, you won't do it. So how much does revenue have to change for that decision to change? That means revenue has to change, reduce by 20. Likewise, cost has to increase by 20, because if cost increases by 20, then cost will become 50. Then you don't make profit again. So anything more than that, you get into a loss position, because cost must change by minimum of 20, must increase by minimum of 20 to change your decision. Likewise, revenue must decrease by minimum of 20 for you to change your decision. And that is margin of safety that we looked at. Yeah. However, it has its limitations, which you need to take note of, very important. And is the fact that only one variable is assessed at a time. So it's limited to only one variable. So only one variable, as you can see, either you're picking revenue or you're picking cost. Revenue, only one variable can be assessed at a time. And that is the disadvantage. And the second disadvantage, which is a limitation, is the fact that probability is ignored. You can see that we have not even spoken about probability here at all. So probability is ignored. And that is the limitation. The second risk method that we can also talk about is the simulation method. Simulation technique. Yeah, and simulation technique is just the use of software. Yeah, this is not done manually. This is done by computer software, computer system. Yeah, computer software develops several probabilities. Yeah, so this one uses probabilities. So several probabilities developed for different variables. Yeah, this uses many variables. So different variables, and based on that, the computer will give you several possible outcomes. Yes, several possible outcomes would be generated. That is just simulations. You are just bringing a possible live scenario into a test environment. Yeah, just the same way if you want to train a pilot how to fly, you create that test environment for the pilot and you see how pilot will react to turbulence, to changes in planes conditions, faulty things. You just simulate different things to see how the pilot will react. The same way in finance, you do it. You simulate things. You change several parameters. Remember, this one you can change different variables at the same time, and that is the advantage. So computer is helping you to see what your likely outcome will be. The most important one, which we will spend so much time, is the third one, and that is the expected value approach, which is usually tested in an exam. Very important, expected value. Yeah. This is another way we can use data to get the most likely outcome. Yeah. And the first thing we need to do here when we are talking about expected value is to determine our probability of occurrence. So we need to determine probability of every possible outcome. So we know that there are many possibilities, but we need to know the probability of each outcome occurring. Yeah. Once we know the probability of every possible outcome, then we can calculate our expected value. And our expected value will be calculated as the probability of the outcome occurring multiplied by the outcome. And if we have different possible outcomes like we always have, it will be addition, yeah, summation of everything that will give us the expected value. Yeah, this is also called weighted average of all possible outcome, because that's another name they can call it in exams for you. So it's the same thing, weighted average of all possible outcomes. This is very similar to your work if you have done FM. Yeah, the way we usually weight every capital in a company, and proportion will be multiplied by the cost of the capital, then we'll add everything together. That's the same approach here. So it's the weighted average. So let me just give you this example so that you get what I mean by weighted average. So let's say we have possible sale quantity. Yeah, let's say we have done our market research, we got data, and we have the possible sale quantity. Yeah, and say we can sell 5,000 units. We see that we can actually sell 10,000 units. It is possible to also sell 2,000 units. However, the probability of selling each of these outcomes varies. So what is the probability? We need to get the probability. Probability of selling 5,000 units is 70%. This is 20%. And the probability of selling 2,000 units is just 10%. So we need to get our expected value for each outcome. Remember, your sum of probability must always equals to 100% or equals to 1. Yeah, it's the same thing. So expected value is outcome multiplied by the probability. So that's 5,000 multiplied by 70%, and that will give us 3,500. 10,000 multiplied by 20%, that is 2,000. And 2,000 times 10%, that is 200. So the summation of everything, addition of everything will give us 5,700 units. So this is our expected value. So we are expecting that we will sell 5,700 units. So if you want to do any budget or want to plan production, we will plan with 5,700 units if we are using expected value approach. Okay, but doesn't mean that it's all best and faultless. It has its own disadvantages as well. So I'm going to look at the limitations of those expected value approach. And the first limitation is the fact that it does not reflect any of the possible outcomes. So it does not reflect any of the possible outcomes. And you can see it. Yeah, we got expected value of 5,700, and none of this is 5,700. They are all different figures, though it's close to 5,000. Yeah, because 5,000 is highly weighted. Yeah, but it's still not exactly the same as any of the possible outcomes. Yeah, so it does not reflect any of the possible outcomes. Likewise, you would need a lot of data. We need large amount of data to be able to get probability. large amount of data is actually required. Yeah, and likewise, its accuracy for sure depends on the accuracy of the market research. Yeah, so that is quite important. On the accuracy of the research, yeah, that's been carried out. And the last one and the most disappointing one is the fact that this method ignores risk attitude of individuals. Yeah, because this is risk neutral method. But we know that not everybody is risk neutral. Some people like to take risk, while some people don't like to take risk at all. Yeah, so it's not everybody that is neutral to risk. Yeah, so therefore, there has to be an improvement on this method. And that is why we now need to look at the other decision techniques. Yeah, and the first one is the fact that we have risk lovers. Right? So we want to look at other techniques that now consider as risk. And we know that there are three types of individuals in terms of their risk attitude. So you can have three types of risk attitudes that we're going to look at. So we're looking at risk attitude here. And the first one is the risk lovers. Yeah, the risk lovers, who are those? Those are the people that like to take risks. So they are also called risk seekers. Yeah. And what we call them is they are the people that will maximize. So that's Maximax people. Yeah, that's their decision criteria. And what does that mean? It means that these are the people that want to maximize the best outcome. So their approach, Maximax. So they will want to maximize the best possible outcome. They don't care whether it's just 0.0001% chance. Once it is the best outcome, that is what they are going for. They are risk takers. So they go for the best of the best. Best of the best. That is what they go for. And you will see when we look at an example soon. The second attitude is the risk hater. These ones, they hate to take risk. They are risk averse. Very risk averse. They don't like to take risk. And their criteria for decision is called the Maximin. Yeah. Maximin, minimum means worst outcome. So these guys, they will look at all the available decisions that they want to take and they will get the worst case scenarios for each decision. Once they look at the worst case scenario for each decision, then they go for the best out of all those worst. So it's best of the worst. That's why it's maximum of the minimum, right? So these guys go for the best of the worst outcomes. So which means they are very conservative. So they go for the best of the worst outcomes. And guess what? For these guys, if all the worst outcomes are lost positions, then they do nothing. They don't take the risk. They walk away. So do nothing can be a response from them. Very important to take note. The third group, talking about risk attitude, is the group of people that we'll call the sore loser. Sore losers. These guys, they don't like to leave any value on the table. If they make profit of $20 and reality now comes and they discover that they could have actually made 50, they will be sad because they want to make all possible profit that can be made. They just don't want to lose. They don't want to feel like, oh, I should have done this. Oh, I should have taken that decision. That is their own problem. When they make profit, they are happy. But if they discover that they should have made more than that profit, they are sad. So these guys, their criteria decision is always to minimize opportunity cost. So the Minimax, the minimize maximum opportunity cost. Yeah, that is what that means. So which means these guys, they want to minimize the maximum opportunity cost. So they are always comparing their profit with best possible profit. And that difference is their opportunity cost. They feel like they are losing something. Yeah. Imagine that you buy a share. If you buy a share at $5, yeah, and as you are watching the shares, you can see the share increases to $8. And you feel like, wow, this is a good profit. I'm very happy. So you take your profit at $3. However, after 2 hours, the shares keeps rising and it rises up to $10. A Minimax person will be sad here because it's looking like I should have actually made a profit of $5 and not $3. So he's sad because he feels like he has lost $2, and that is the opportunity cost. That is what a Minimax person is trying to reduce. So they want to minimize such opportunity cost. You'll see in an example, we're going to do a calculation soon. So just have preliminary background for this. And so for every decision, you're asking yourself, what is the possible outcome? You want to know the possible outcome. Yeah. And that is what we want to use in the next example.